Hi there, my name is Trish. Welcome back to part 3 of the 5 Photoshop beginner tutorial series. In this tutorial, I'm going to focus on the menu, which is at the very top of your screen. I'm going to show you how to create all of these different effects in Photoshop. Without further ado, let's jump right into it. So when it comes to the menu bar, the first thing you need to know is how you open a file and how you save it. And when it comes to saving, there are two basic ways of saving a file that you have in Photoshop, or I will say 3 ways. So you have the PSD, which is the working file. You have the JPEG, which is your final image of what you have produced, or PNG. PNG is anything that does not have a background. And typically, things like logos are done without background, so you can drop them into whatever you're working in or your design. To open a new file, which I've already explained in the first tutorial, but I just want to give a refresher. So to open a new file, you go to File and then you click on New. When you click on New, the basic is to choose Custom. When you choose Custom, you can then determine your height and your width and also your resolution. I always advise that you keep your resolution to 300 because if you choose a lower resolution and you need to print your final design, it might be difficult to bump up the resolution. So you always want to start at a higher resolution and then you can decrease it as need be. And then you want to keep your color mode on RGB. Your background can be white or it can be either black or it can be transparent. But typically, just leave it on white, which you can use as your default. Notice that my measurement is in inches. So if you're comfortable using pixels, you choose that, or centimeters or millimeters. But I am so used to inches that I keep everything I do in inches. So you're going to press Create. Photoshop will open up a new canvas for you. One thing that I will advise you to do is that whenever you are designing for, let's say, for a website or maybe for Instagram or Facebook, you need to know what type of interface they have so that when you are designing, you make sure that there is a contrast between the interface and your final design. You don't want your final design to be washed out because it matches your interface. I'm going to show you an example. Facebook has a white interface. So let's take this image for instance, because this image has a lot of white in the background. If I change the workspace to white, I do a test to make sure that my image will not be washed out, but that I will have a good contrast. This is what you do. You right click on your workspace, a little window pops up for you, and you can choose whatever color you want. So I'm going to change it. I'm going to click on custom. I'm going to click on select custom, and I'm going to choose white. I'm going to click OK. So as you can see, this is how your image will look if you put it on Facebook. So you see that you have a white background around it and your picture is really not popping against the white. So for something like this should give you a red flag, and you can even add a little bit of a vignette around your image so that you get a good contrast between your image and the interface background, which is white in this case. So to demonstrate, you will unlock your layer, and all you need to do is go to the adjustment layers, and then you want to choose something like gradient. And then you want to double click within your gradient, change the color to, let's say, black, hit OK, and then hit OK here. We're going to change from linear to radial, and I'm going to reverse it. And then I'm going to increase the scale. a little bit more darker. And I'm going to click OK. So right off the bat, you see that just by this little effect, your picture begins to pop against the white background. You always have to be in a habit of saving your work. How do you save your work? What you do is you go to File and then you click on Save As. Now, Photoshop has two ways of saving your file if you have it open in Photoshop, or multiple ways, but the default way is PSD. PSD is considered Photoshop working file. So if you click on Save As and you go to where you want to save the file, Photoshop will automatically choose the PSD Save As type for your file because it recognizes it as a working file. So you save it, you can rename your file if you want, and then click Save. And then you just need to click Save. What if you're done with all the changes and you want to save it as one image? All you need to do is go to File, same thing as Save As, click on Save As to your computer. But in this case, instead of choosing a PSD, you change it to actually a JPEG file. When you save it as a JPEG file, it becomes one image. And for quality, you want to keep it at 12 and you just click OK. You leave everything else the same. So that is the difference between a working file and a final image that you might want to show to your client. All right, so now that you know how to save a file as a PSD and JPEG, I want to show you how to also save a file as a PNG. So to save a file as a PNG, I'm going to close this and I'm just going to hit yes. And then I'm going to show you this image. So this is a logo that has already been designed. And if I move this logo, you see that it has this gray and white checker background. That is an indication that the background is transparent. And if you remember, when we went to File to create a new canvas, you had the option of either changing the background to white, black, or even transparent. So if you choose a transparent option, you can have that and then you can create your own logo. And once you finish, you want to save it. So I'm going to show you how you can save it as a PNG. So I'm going to scale this down a little, this logo. And I'm going to set this in the middle. So let's say that I want to save this file as a PNG file. So all you need to do is go to File, Save As on this computer. And then this time you want to choose PNG. So you just look for PNG and you save it to bring in a PNG file. All I have to do is go to my folder. There it is. So you see that I have two options. If I hover over my file, one file is saying PNG and the other file is saying Adobe Photoshop. So the Adobe Photoshop is the PSD file. So if I click on the PNG and I drag it into my Photoshop and I release it, it will show up in my file. I can scale it and then I can move it to this side. I can deselect, and as you can see, it has no background. So that is how you save a file as PSD so you can bring it into another image. The next thing you want to know in the file is that if you have opened a recent file which you've closed, you don't necessarily have to go to Open to look it up. You can just go to Recent File. Everything shows up here for you. Something that I just closed, I can just click on it and it will reopen for me because it's still in the history. You don't have to go to the folder to go look for it. It's just 2 clicks away. You can open that file. I'm going to close that. So still on the file, one thing that you can also do is that let's say that I have all of these files open. And I want to close everything except this file. All I need to do is that you want to make sure that the file that you don't want to close is the one that you are currently in. And then when you go back to file, you go to close others. So if I click on close others, it's going to close all the other ones that I have currently open. So in this case, I haven't saved this file. So I just have to hit save so it can save it. So as you can see, everything else closes except the one that I'm currently in. I'm sure you're wondering, why do we have save and save as? Okay, so the difference between the two is that with the save, it will save your file as the PNG which you are working on. Whatever existing file type it is what it will save to. But if you want to change the file type, then you want to choose Save As, and then it will give you the option of changing your file type. So let me demonstrate. If I move this image, let's say to here, and I go to save, all I need to do is click on save, and it will save what changes I've made to my working file. But if I want to save it as maybe a PDF file or a JPEG, then you have to choose Save As so that option can be given to you. You can also export your file by going to export, and then you can choose whatever preference you want. Recently, I used the ATEM saving option, which if you are working with a live video, you can save whatever changes you make that you want to show up on your live video. And as you save it, it will then automatically show up on your ATEM, which is being projected as a live video. So if I click on exit, it basically closes Photoshop in its entirety. Now that I've covered all the basics you need to know when it comes to the things under the file, we're now going to move on to edit. Now under edit, there are other options or other things that you can use as undo, redo, which helps you to go back. If you've done something and you've done some changes, but you want to go back to previous changes, you just use the undo to go back or redo to go forward. Now, something unique that I want to show you, content aware fill. So let's say that I don't want this plant showing up in this image. So I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to show you what to do. So first of all, my layers panel is not acting the way I want. So what I can do, I can just go to essentials and do reset my essential. And then as you can see, my layers panel is more visible now. So to get rid of this flower plant, what you want to do is click on your lasso tool and you want to make a circle or a selection around this plant. You want to make sure that you are on the right layer. I'm going to unlock this layer. So you go to edit and then you choose content aware. Now, when you choose content aware, Photoshop gives you a preview, or as you can see on the right-hand side, it shows that that little area that I selected has been replaced for me. I'm pleased with my replacement, so I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to press Control D. So the next thing I want to show you is, what if you want to extend your canvas, but you want to just extend the table beneath without affecting without affecting anything else. So this is what you do. First of all, I'm going to delete this since we don't need it anymore. And I'm going to just merge these two layers. So we just have one file that we're working with. So if I click on my crop tool and I increase my canvas, you see that I do have a transparent area, which is just extra, and the image does not extend to that. So now the question is, what if I want my table to extend to that? So what you do is you want to click on your move and you want to click on edit. You want to make sure you have your layer selected. You go to edit and then you want to choose content aware scale. You want to make sure you hold down your shift and then you scale it. But what happens? The laptop and the teacup is all skewed. That's not what we want. So we're going to press Control Z. We're going to go back to ensure that we don't get any skewing of our laptop. What we can do is that we're going to go to the Object Select tool, and I'm going to make sure I have my layer selected, and I'm going to choose Object Select tool, and I'm going to make a selection around the laptop, and Photoshop is going to select that for me. So if I want to make sure that I add the hands, all I need to do is just select that, select this, and then add that. And I can just do this and select whatever area I need to add. And notice that I have the add to selection activated on the option bar. Also, I want to make sure that I select my coffee. That was easy. That was one quick selection. I'm going to go to select, and then I'm going to click on save selection. I'm going to rename it as laptop. I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to press Control D to deselect. So now if I click on my layer and I go to edit, then I choose content aware scale. Before I rescale this, you want to make sure that you have protect. You want to click on the file you saved. Holding down my shift, I can now begin to scale the background. I can double click, and as you can see, the laptop is still intact. The coffee is intact, but my background has been stretched enough for me. So this is two ways that you could use the content aware. Still under the menu bar, we also have what we call the transform, which is a basic tool that you will be using a lot. So I'm going to open a new file, and then I'm going to show you what you can do. I'm going to double click to open this file since it's a PNG file. Under the transform tool, you have scale, or you can skew, or you can also distort, make a perspective, warp. You can even flip horizontal or vertical, or rotate 180, 90 degrees, or 90 degrees clockwise or counterclockwise. So there are so many different options. I just want to show you a few. Let's say that we want to flip our image. We want everything on the left to be on the right. So you want to select your layer. You want to go to edit transform, and you want to flip horizontal. So now everything that was on the left is now on the right. And you can do the same thing with other things. So let's say with this text, if I want to create, let's say, a shadow effect, I can create a duplicate of this text. And I can actually flip one by going to edit, transform, and I can flip it vertical. And I can move this down. So I think you see where I'm going with this. So I can basically create a shadow effect on this text, and I can even take the opacity down like so, and I can even add a gradient. I can add a gradient effect to this, and I can click OK. So, but as you can see, the gradient effect is being applied to both texts. I want it to just be applied to the text below. So all you do is holding down your Alt, you see a little icon has been activated. So you click on that, and as you can see, the gradient is only applied to the bottom text. So this is just a basic way of using your vertical and horizontal flip tool. So we're just going to move along. So the next thing on the menu bar is what we call the image. Now, under the image, there are different things that you can also use. If you go under mode, you see that our default color setting is the RGB and is at 8 bits. You can change that to even grayscale. It will change everything to grayscale for you. When I go to image, you see that there's still other options that I can use. If I go to image adjustment, under adjustment, there are different effects that I can apply to this image to even transform it. And the adjustment options are also right here under the layers panel. So there are two ways. When you use the adjustment, let's say this background, I want to change it. If I use the adjustment levels here, it will only apply to the layer that I have selected. So I'm going to click OK. And as you can see, it has only been applied to the layer. This is a destructive way of using the adjustment layers. What if I change my mind and I want to go back to the original color? Because I've done this, I will have to click undo several times to go back to where I had it. That is if I haven't done any work. So if I've done any work in between, I basically will lose all the work I've done. But the easiest way and the best way of applying an adjustment layer in a non-destructive way is by using the adjustment levels under the layers panel. So I'm going to press Ctrl Z to go back. So if I want to add an adjustment levels, all I need to do is click on my layer, click on my adjustment levels, and go to hue saturation. Notice that a new layer has been generated with a layer mask. So I can make all the changes that I want and collapse this. So this change is only applied to this layer. If I move this above all the other layers, you see that the hue and saturation adjustment layer that have been created has been applied to all of my layers beneath. Now, if I want it to be only applied to, let's say, the mic layer or the layer below, all I have to do is press Alt and then clip it to only the mic. So as you can see, the changes on the hue saturation layer has only been applied to the mic and nothing else. So this is a good way of using it, and is non-destructive. If I don't want it, I can turn it off, and then I go back to the original color. So under image, we can also rescale our existing image. So I can click on image scale, and then I want to click on resample, and then you want to make sure that you check the link so it will allow whatever changes you make to the width to also be applied to the height proportionally. And then if I click OK, you see that it scales it down. So the next thing on the menu bar is the layer. And I'm going to skip the layer because I already have a tutorial that I did, which was the last tutorial, which talks in depth about layers and everything you need to know about layers. If you haven't seen that tutorial, I'm going to put a link to that in the description below, and you can go and watch that tutorial. And the type, there are a few things that I want to show you. So if you are looking for your character panel and you can't find it, which helps you to change the different font styles, your size, the height of your font, the spacing between your font, you just have to go on the type and then panels and choose character. So you have everything here, even for your paragraphs, is the same thing. So if you don't find this in your Photoshop the first time you open it, just go on the type panels and you can pull both. The last thing that I want to show you and the type is that Photoshop has a default paragraph that you can use as a placeholder. You're designing a newspaper article and you don't have the information to insert. So you can put in what Photoshop has as a placeholder. So I'm going to demonstrate how that works. So if I click on my text tool and I click within my canvas, I don't have to type anything. I can just go to type and then choose paste Lorraine. And as you can see, Photoshop generates an existing text that comes in for me. So the only downside of this is that you basically have a very long text. If I zoom out, you basically have a very long text that you will have to take the time to break it apart. That is the only thing. So I'm just going to delete this layer. So moving along from the next thing is the select. So with the select, there are a few things or one or two things that I want to show you under the select. So if I click on all, it's going to select everything in my canvas. And notice that I only have one image. So it selects everything. If I want to deselect, I can press Control D to deselect, or I can go to select and press deselect, and it will take off the selection around my object or whatever I have selected. The next thing under that is you want to reselect. So if I want to reselect, I can just click that. So you have auto select and then show transform control. So if you uncheck, if I select my layer, you see that it activates my transform control, which allows me to then scale my selection. But if I uncheck it, that goes away. And if I need to rescale this, then I will have to press Control Alt T to then activate my selection. But to make your life easier, you want to make sure that you have Show Transform Control. And the other thing that is also good to have checked is your auto select. So your auto select helps you, once you click on something, it selects it for you. So these are the two things that I wanted to show you before we move on. So when you go back to select, the other thing I want to show you is inverse. Now, inverse is very good in the sense that, let's say that I want to select everything else around this teacup. So what I can do is, let's say if I go to use my object select tool with my layer selected and I draw an outline around this and a selection is made, but I don't want to select that. I want the inverse. I want to select everything else but that. So to do that, you go to select and then you click on inverse. So as you can see, the inverse now is selected for you. I can now right click and say make a copy. So if I make a copy and I turn off the background, now you see that that section has been cropped out because that was the only part that wasn't selected. I'm going to delete this and we are going to move on. So I'm just giving you some few basic things that you can use as a beginner. So I'm not going to touch up on all of the other things. So we're going to move on, and then we're going to talk about filters. Now, there's so much you can do under filters, but I'm just going to go ahead and give you the basic things that you can do. Let's say that I have this text and I want to change it to a smart object. So I can either go here, right click and convert to smart object, or I can go under filter and then click convert to smart object and then click OK. Now the smart object changes your text from an editable text to a text that is not editable. So it means that it becomes destructive. So I cannot use my text tool and then change this font any longer. But the cool thing about turning layers into smart object is that you can do other things with it. So if I click on my lasso tool and I create a diagonal, I can make sure my layer is selected. I can right click and then I can choose a copy. Now, if I choose a copy, if I click on that copy, which is above, I can move it. So let's say that I change this color. If I pick a red and I change this layer, the text, you can see that all of a sudden I create a very artistic look with just this few gestures. The next thing I want to show you is what we call the camera raw. Now, the camera raw allows you to basically add final richness to your work. Select all of these layers and I want to group them. And once you group them, you click Shift Control Alt E. Photoshop will generate a final image for you. So if I turn off my group layer, which has all the different layers, you see that I still have one file. And if I move this file, you see that it doesn't have any more layers. It's just one image. So what I can do with the camera raw effect is if I have this layer selected, I can go under filter, select camera raw, and then a new window will open up for me. Just like in Lightroom, you have all of these different effects that you can apply to your photo. So I can just use this to bring up maybe the richness in the wood tones. Notice how my color is beginning to change. So I can do so much with this. I can take down the exposure. I can increase the contrast in this image. I can take the highlights up. I can increase the shadows. So I'm just doing this quickly so you can see, you sort of have an idea of where I'm going with this. You know, if I increase the texture, you begin to see that the texture in the wood begins to show up more. I can take down the clarity and make it even more blurry. I can make it more hazy. And then if I want, I can take down the saturation and click OK. So if I show you the before and after, you can see a difference. So this is the before and this is the after. So you can do so much within Photoshop once you have your final design. You can just do a little bit more touch up before you save it. So the next thing on the filter that I would like to show you is what we call Liquify. So I'm going to go to my working file and I'm going to bring in this subject into Photoshop. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to say open with Photoshop. So with my image open, I want to go ahead and show you how you can you can use the Liquify. So I'm going to unlock this layer and I'm going to go to filter and I'm going to choose Liquify. So in Liquify, you can use the forward warp tool and you can basically begin to lift up areas of your subject. So as you can see, I can even make just the hair of my subject very big. So I can give her a very big afro. I can basically take the hair out and give her a very big afro, just like that. And notice how the window is messed up. So I can go back to the window area with my, and I can go back into the hair and basically fix the hair. You basically get where I'm going with this. So you can do that even for the face. Photoshop has options in the property on the right-hand side that you can manipulate to just change the facial expression of your subject and make it even more of a cartoonish or a caricature. So notice how the eye begins to change as I move the different sliders. So right now her eyes are even bigger. I can make one bigger and make one smaller. So it's as though she has one big eye and the other one is just a normal eye. And then even with the nose, I can increase the nose, the lips, I can increase it. I can take it all the way up and do something like this. I can decrease, see how her jaw is moving. So you can basically do so much. I can even shrink her face and make her face smaller. I can even use my warp tool to now make her face even much smaller, just like that. And create something different or unique, just like that. So I give her a smaller face. One eye looks a little bit bigger, and then I can even increase her forehead to do something like this. Something like that. So this is basically how you can use the Liquify tool to come up with creative ways of doing caricature on yourself or on somebody. So if I click OK, you see that this is how it looks, but the original image wasn't like that. So that is basically the tool that you use to create a caricature. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to click no. The basic tool that I want to show you when it comes to using the blur effect is the Gaussian blur or the gallery blur. So I'm going to demonstrate. I'm going to show you, first of all, we want to make a copy of this. So I'm going to go to blur and I'm going to choose Gaussian blur. Now, as you can see, the image is all blurred out. So I can play around with the different levels of blur effect that I want. So if I'm satisfied with this, I can click OK. But the problem is that the subject is also blurred. So to change that, if I add a layer mask, I can invert this blur effect. And then I can use my brush tool with my foreground as white and my brush head a little bit bigger. I'm going to increase it a little bit more. I can begin to show the areas that I want to blur just by painting over. So this is one way that you can use the blur effect. So everything else around the subject is blurred out and the subject alone is in focus. So this is a very quick way of blurring out a background. And there are so many different options under the blur. If you go to blur, motion blur, radar blur. So these are all things that you can try out. The next thing that I want to show you is in 3D. So I'm going to first of all type in a text so I can demonstrate what I'm trying to show. So I'm going to type in sunny and I'm going to highlight, change the color, and I'm going to rescale this to sunny. I'm going to set it right there. So to create a long shadow of this, you first of all want to create a copy of your layer, and I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to go to my 3D and then choose 3D, new 3D extrusion. And then you want to choose no instead of yes. And then the next thing we want to do, I'm going to collapse this. You want to make sure that you go back to your window and then click on your property. That is if your property is not showing up. I want to move it out of the way so you can see as I demonstrate. And at the right hand top corner, you see the plan view of your 3D font extrusion. So if I take my extrusion depth all the way, you see that in the 3D, you see the extrusion being extended. Now you want to uncheck your catch shadow and your cast shadow. And then you want to go to the icon next to it. Once you click on that, you want to scroll down. You want to change your bend to shear, and you want to make sure that one of this angle is either at 90, or you can just move your slider to the desired angle that you want. So as you can see, I'm pleased with this angle, and I'm going to collapse this. Now I'm going to come out of this view, you need to go back and click on your layer. And once you click on your layer, then you come out of that command. But the next thing you want to do, you want to go to the layer with extrusion. You want to hold down your control, select that extrusion, and then you want to turn off everything else. So once you do that, you want to click on a new layer, and you want to now maybe use a different color. I'm just going to use red, and I'm just going to paint that in. But you want to make sure you bring that layer beneath your. This is just to show you what you can do. So if you change your angle, you can see that there are so many different cool effects that you can achieve with this. But I just wanted to give you the basic so that you can see the potential of the 3D effect. The next thing I want to talk to you about are the views. So when you come to the views, you see different options. You see your zoom in, your zoom out. If I click on that, you see that it zooms in and it zooms out for you, or you can use your magnifying glass to achieve the same thing. Or you can also press fit to screen and it will fit your canvas to screen for you. So as you go down the list, you can zoom in 100%. The other thing that I want to show you is that you can actually turn on your rulers. Sometimes when you open Photoshop for the first time, your rulers are turned off. So when you go into view, that is where you turn on your rulers. And also when you turn on your rulers, you also want your snaps to be turned on, because your snaps do help you to be able to align things and to snap to a corner or something. So let's say I draw in my guideline. You just pull it from your ruler. You can do the same thing here, and you can bring down this as well. And if I want a center, I can do this. But as you can see, I can't snap to the center. But if I go to view and I turn on my snap, you see that if I try to snap again, you see that it picks up the center for me. If I do this, it picks up the center for me as well. So your snap tool comes in very handy. And as well as you can also lock your guide and you can clear your guide. The Windows option is where you can basically get all the different sort of tools, or the different bars that shows up on your workspace. So whenever maybe you're watching even somebody's tutorial, maybe it's not mine, but you're watching a tutorial and the instructor or the person mentions a particular toolbar that you don't see it on your screen, you have to go under Windows and then you can find it there. So if I want to see all my styles, I click on my styles, it all shows up. So I see all the different options that it provides. If I go to Windows, I can also see my history. And now the history is something that I already explained in my previous tutorial, but the history helps you if you want to go back to, let's say, a few steps to what you've done in your work. You can use your history to just, step back. So if I click on my history, see, it basically takes me back and I lose what I had before. If I want everything back, I click on this, and then you see that it takes me to where I was in my last edit to this file. So you can close that. So there are so many things that you can pull up. You can pull up your histogram, your gradient, you can show it up. If I'm not seeing my layers, I can go down here and then I can choose my layers. So these are all things that you can basically find if you don't see them on your workspace. So I'm going to go back and reset my essentials so that I can see everything the way I want to see it. And then lastly is your help. So your help basically is where you go to ask questions. If you don't understand something, there's Photoshop help. There's also Photoshop tutorial, and then about Photoshop, and then about Photoshop plugin. So these are all different things that you can go into and then be able to see what is available to you in terms of the help. You can even go to manage your account. You can log out of your account or log in. So I just wanted to show you that that is also there. This brings us to the end of another tutorial, which is the third session of our 5 series of beginners tutorial. I think I'm also going to throw in a bonus series. So we will basically end up having 6 series. I hope you found this tutorial very fun and interesting. Please do like, comment, subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell for all future uploads. And as always, thanks for watching. Bye.